Welcome to episode 3 in our series on Judaism and animal welfare. In this episode, I'm going to extend our study towards conservation and how our obligation to look after the planet that we live on. We only have one planet, and although at the time of recording there are plans to eventually, in decades' time, perhaps colonize another planet. I think Elon Musk has some great ideas, and I'm a big admirer of his. But if the money and the effort that was spent in order to hop towards another planet, as opposed to perhaps just trying to maintain our own planet, I think that would be the more sensible direction. But sometimes we forget that it's unlikely that we'll planet hop, and that won't be the answer to our problems. And whether you believe or don't believe the empirical data regarding the state of the planet, I think the general consensus is we can all see and notice the differing weather patterns that are emerging year upon year in more extreme measures, and perhaps there is something going on, and the solution is just to temper our excesses and rein ourselves in. It's a sensible thing to do, and look after our own planet that we're on now, that we're only suited to living on. And we're going to look at, in this episode, various conservation laws that appear in the Torah, and all of them make sense. In every event, God warns us. We say the Shema a number of times a day, and in it is basically a warning of how to behave. There's no middle ground. God doesn't give a middle ground to say, you know what, if you don't do what I suggest you say, if you do a little bit, things may be okay. It's black and white. You do this, this will happen. You don't do this, this will happen. And he also mentions that in terms of how we look after the planet. We're going to come on to a few interesting aspects, but I'd like to start with the simple things on earth, the things that are around us, the things that are free to us, like trees. Sometimes trees are underappreciated. They grow freely. All we have to do is plant them. Sometimes we don't even have to plant them. They'll spring up in wild areas. And they look after themselves. They provide their own nourishment, and they give us oxygen. They draw out poisonous aspects of our environment and our atmosphere and pollutants. They provide us with materials, wood, and many, many other things. And they don't cost us anything. But why do we chop them down in order to clear areas for concrete and other defective things for our planet? All we have to do is let what God has created do its job, and it'll look after us. You couldn't ask for anything more. It's God's given gift. So what does the Torah say about trees? We are obligated in Deuteronomy chapter 20 verse 19, which forbids the destruction of fruit-bearing trees, even when you're waging a war against the city. The verse concludes with the quotation, and I quote, "Thou shalt not cut them down, for the tree of the field is a man's life, to employ them in the siege." So number one, you shouldn't be cutting down fruit-bearing trees for a purpose of war. It's an evil thing. And also, regarding the trees, from Genesis chapter 19 verse 23, we are ordered that fruit trees should be left wild and unpruned for the first few years in order to give them strength to increase their yield. Sometimes as humans we're a little bit impatient, and we feel that we don't give things time to allow them to gain some sort of growth stability, and this law of allowing them to remain unpicked for the first few years is a sensible thing to do. Also, we know that throughout the Torah there are many scriptural obligations to be have a conservation minded attitude about overutilizing or wearing out natural resources. In Leviticus chapter 25, verses 2 to 4, God commands us, and I quote, "The land shall keep a Sabbath unto the Lord. In the 7th year shall be a Sabbath for the Lord. Thou shalt neither sow thy field nor prune thy vineyard." So we are told a very sensible and makes sense attitude to allow things to recover. There's nothing that we do as physical human beings, however hard we work, at some point we have to recover. And we know that if we don't recover, our muscles will tear apart, and we will find ourselves useless human beings after a certain period of time. But we know that if we rest and relax and recover our muscles, let our muscles regrow, we will become fit and strong human beings. The same is with planet Earth and the actual ground. We have to allow nature to recover, and sometimes we feel as if the urgency that man utilizes in order to gain from various things, the greed takes over the long-term view, and short-term gains outweigh long-term benefits, and this is absolutely wrong. So the idea of Shemitah is introduced to allow, after the 7th year or in the 7th year, for the land to remain fallow, let it recover, and as God says, and I quote from Leviticus chapter 26, "If you walk in my statutes and keep my commandments and do them, then I will give you your rains and their season, and the land shall yield her produce, and the trees of the field shall yield their fruit, and I will give peace in the land." So this is absolutely correct. We know that there are certain swathes of China that have been razed to the ground and turned into cities, and you notice that the wind has now a different path. It's not tempered, or there's no barrier by some natural forests or swathes of lands that have growth that temper the flow of air. And you find that swathes of the country become dust bowls, and then weather patterns become disrupted, and things really turn bad very quickly. And I'm going to quote further on chapter 26 of Leviticus, verses 31 through 35. And I quote, "And I will make your cities waste, and bring your sanctuaries unto desolation. And I will bring the land into desolation, and I will scatter you among the heathen. And your land shall be desolate, and your cities waste. Then shall the land enjoy her Sabbaths, as long as it lieth desolate, and ye be in your enemy's land. Even then shall the land rest, and enjoy her Sabbaths. As long as it lieth desolate, it shall rest, because it did not rest in your Sabbaths, when you dwelt upon it." So God is giving a blatant warning. He'd rather kick the Jewish people out of Israel than let the children of Israel destroy the land. He said, "I'd rather put you in enemies' lands, and I'll let the land recover without you on it, because I gave you a chance and you didn't take advantage of it." He also It's also warned in Numbers chapter 35, and I quote, "So you shall not pollute the land wherein ye are. Defile not therefore the land which you shall inhabit, wherein I dwell." So, and also the prophet Yeshaya in chapter 5 verse 8, "Woe unto them that join house to house, that lay field to field, till there be no place, that they may be placed alone in the midst of the earth." That's a blatant warning against overpopulation and not allowing kind of green belts to exist. Perhaps in times to come we'll realize the intelligence of these prophets. Perhaps now we're in a frenzy of just city building, but then we'll realize to our detriment, and we'll have to recover our ways and introduce green belts that kind of temper the effects of weather. In fact, also in Numbers chapter 35, it describes how the cities in Israel have to be surrounded by a green belt, and I quote, "to open land around the cities, 1,000 cubits round about." That those sort of measurements are used to measure cities' green belts, and for cattle grazing and for public enjoyment. So the Torah is blatant, and our prophets have been clear in what is the sensible and only way forward. And it's to think about things more carefully in regards to how we live and how we cohabit with nature, to know that the planets that developed over a tremendous period of time, and if we make anthropomorphic or human-led changes that are too severe for what has been in the past, nature will bite back in the severest way imaginable. And perhaps we should conclude this episode with the words of the wisest man to ever live, King Solomon, in his Ecclesiastes, Kohelet, where he talks about the connection between the fate of our planet and our fate, how we are linked together like a chain, and we cannot extrapolate ourselves from the destiny of the planet and our fellow creatures. So he quotes from Ecclesiastes chapter 3 verse 19. He stresses that if the wildlife perishes, humans will not survive much further. And he quotes, "For that which befalls the Son of Man befalls beasts. Even one thing befalls them. As the other one dies, so dies the other. They all have one breath. That man has no preeminence over beasts." And I also think another very intelligent man, Albert Einstein, also said regarding the bees that help pollinate our fruits and various other produce and flowers, that if the bees die out, the humans will die out approximately 4 years later. So these are blatant warnings, and I think we're all sensible and we all know what is right and what is wrong, but a time comes when we have to actually take action, and sometimes it's painful and it's annoying, but we have to look after our planet at the time when it needs it. So I think we'll conclude the episode there on that note. And we must remember we have only one planet, and God is watching us. We are supposed to be stewards of the planet, and we have to act like that. We have to act like responsible human beings. Perhaps God will save us if we take it too far, but we should do it ourselves. I think it's something that is incumbent upon ourselves. Maybe it's a test by God to see how far we'll go before we recover the planet, but we seem to be pushing it to the limits in our inaction, and hopefully we'll see sense, and things will work out better, but we must take the first step, as Rabbi Tarfon says. If there's an act that has to be done, we cannot desist from it. Even if our generation will not see the recovery ourselves, we have to start. We have to pass the baton over to the next generation, but we have to start the race. And I'm hopeful that we will do that. And in the next episode, we're going to look at another aspect of animal welfare that I hope you can all join me for.